This video is brought to you by channel partner 4 years running Squarespace. They just refreshed their already industry-leading website creation toolset, making it easier than ever before to build the perfect website for your business, your project, or just for fun. They're offering a special discount to viewers of this channel, so stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Gamers, today we will discuss Ubisoft. This week, Ubisoft announced that one of its biggest releases of the year, Star Wars Outlaws, underperformed, prompting them to delay Assassin's Creed Shadows into next year. The CEO also announced a company-wide investigation into the state of affairs at a time when the stock price is 10 euros a share, down from over 100 euros a share back in 2018. How did Ubisoft get here? How did this happen? Well, I think it's helpful to work backwards. Ubisoft's most recent release, Star Wars Outlaws, has reviewed and sold poorly, with Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot publicly lamenting the sales figures, calling them, quote, softer than expected, end quote. We'll come back to that. Their last major release before that was the free-to-play X-Defiant, and while we don't have any definitive player counts or revenue data, Guillemot said in a separate investor call that the game was also, quote, behind expectations, end quote. The biggest release before that was Skull and Bones. That was a game in various forms of ideation and development for over 11 years, delayed and rebooted multiple times during its rocky development, and when it finally arrived, it was an objectively worse version of a game that Ubisoft had released 11 years prior, that being Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Still the GOAT, by the way. Speaking of long development timelines, Beyond Good and Evil 2 recently overtook Duke Nukem Forever as the game with the longest development timeline prior to release. Duke Nukem Forever was in development for 15 years, Beyond Good and Evil 2 has shot past that and shows absolutely no signs of releasing anytime soon. Somewhat inexplicably, the project has not yet been cancelled. You know what was cancelled earlier this year though? The Division Heartland. That was likely a free-to-play survival extraction game that was basically a riff on the survival game mode that debuted in the Division 1, a game mode that was doing both Battle Royale and Extraction before PUBG and Tarkov were doing it. Heartland had been in development for around 5 years when it was cancelled. No explanation was given as to why the title was canned. Still, that wasn't as rough as the cancellation of Ghost Recon Frontline, a Battle Royale game cancelled in 2022. That game was finished, like properly finished, ready to go out the door, but the feedback that Ubisoft got from testing was so universally negative that they thought it better to cancel the project 6 feet from the finish line rather than see how it fared in the market. Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora launched in December of last year, much after the excitement for the Way of Water movie had faded. The game was decent, but Ubisoft have not publicly declared any sales data for it, indicating that it likely hasn't done the sort of James Cameron numbers that Ubisoft's executives were no doubt hoping for. Remember Rainbow Six Extraction, released back in 2022? Nope, you don't. A genuine opportunity to make a compelling PvE game that would leverage all of the incredible work that's gone into Rainbow Six Siege, harkening back to the glory days of the franchise when it was a single-player or co-op PvE game. Instead, what we got was essentially a glorified seasonal event that for some reason had its own skew. Far Cry 6 released in 2021, and look, I love me some Far Cry. I love it more than most. But even I was like, come on guys, are we really doing this again? Far Cry has essentially been the same game since Far Cry 3, released back in 2012, and while I quite liked 4 and 5 for their settings and narratives, that formula was in desperate need of renovation by the time Giancarlo Esposito rocked up, and not even he could distract us from the fact that everything we were doing on his little island paradise felt all too familiar. Immortal Phoenix Rising, great game. The sequel was going to focus on Polynesian deities, love that. Too bad it got cancelled so that Ubisoft could focus on making more Assassin's Creed games. There are, after all, around 5 to 10 AC games currently in development, depending on which leaks turn out to be true. Hyperscape came and went in 2020, a bit of a shame to be honest, because while it was a Battle Royale game, it was at least trying to do some new stuff. Still, I know no one really holds a candle for that one except me, fair enough. The Division 2 launched to rave reviews and mammoth commercial success in 2019, but Ubisoft had absolutely no plan for how to support that game over the medium to long term. As such, the game essentially died until someone at Ubisoft HQ was like, remember when that was like the most successful new IP launch in history? There's probably some money to be made there. At which point the studio had to basically relearn how to make content for that game, since many of the people who worked on it previously were now allocated to Avatar or Star Wars Outlaws. We all remember Ghost Recon Breakpoint's disastrous launch back in 2019, so I don't need to recount that, but do recall that Breakpoint was the first game to feature support for Ubisoft's very exciting Quartz initiative. That's right, NFTs in your video games, people. Remember when all the CEOs were promising you that that was the future of video games? Ubi were one of the first out the gate in this category. A company that is famous for chasing trends had a first mover advantage on what was inarguably one of the biggest scams ever foisted on the video games industry. That was occurring at around the same time that Ubisoft's culture of sexual harassment and cronyism was being exposed, with dozens and dozens of stories from people about the deeply ingrained systemic cultural issues threatening the safety, career progression, and mental health of people in basically every Ubisoft studio, regardless of location. To this day, very few senior leaders were held accountable, and most notably, Yves Guillemot is still in his job, denying any knowledge of the cultural issues or specific events that were alleged to have occurred, despite there being evidence to the contrary. Now, I don't want to paint a picture that Ubisoft has had no success at all during this period, because they certainly have. The new AC trilogy has been wildly successful. Games like Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, Riders Republic, and Mario Rabbids have felt like revivifying breaths of fresh air, and the live service mainstays like The Crew, For Honor, and Rainbow Six Siege have all found devoted audiences. But while these successes are notable, they do not change the fact that this past decade has been disastrous for Ubisoft's brand. Ask people what they think of when they hear the name Ubisoft, and they'll say things like rehash, filler, buggy, bloated, the fucking collector's edition Matrix bullshit. No one associates this brand with innovation or a high quality bar. Ubisoft's games are famous for coming in underbaked and over-monetized. That isn't true all the time, but it's true often enough for the games when it matters enough for people to get this idea in their heads. That is a fact. We do not used to talk about Ubisoft in this way, but over the course of this past decade, and in particular over the course of this current console generation, that is where things have firmly landed. Be it in greenlighting or managing projects, assuring quality, protecting employees, or safeguarding the brand, this company has not been well led. But don't worry about any of this, guys, because Ubisoft's executive committee, led by CEO Yves Guillemot, are now on the case. This week they announced that they, the very people who have been leading the company through all of this stuff, are conducting a thorough investigation into what's gone wrong, and they're going to get to the bottom of it. It's literally the "I think you should leave hot dog" meme in press release form. In a note acknowledging the poor commercial performance of Star Wars Outlaws, Yves Guillemot said this, quote, "In the light of recent challenges, we acknowledge the need for greater efficiency while delighting players. As a result, beyond the first important short-term actions undertaken, the Executive Committee, under the supervision of the Board of Directors, is launching a review aimed at further improving our execution, notably in this player-centric approach, and accelerating our strategic path towards a higher performing model to the benefit of our stakeholders and shareholders," end quote. Did you notice who Yves said would benefit most from this rigorous investigation? Stakeholders and shareholders. We are neither of those things, by the way. We are Ubisoft's customers, so I think it's at least a little bit telling that we're left out of that list of beneficiaries. To their credit, Ubisoft's executives have taken some positive steps here. Citing the poor performance of Star Wars Outlaws, they are delaying Assassin's Creed Shadows. It will now launch February 14th next year. That is to provide additional polish to the game, which, rumor has it, is welcome news, since apparently the game is in pretty rough shape and would have launched poorly had it gone out on November 15th. Secondly, Ubisoft are abandoning the pay-to-play early thing that they've been doing for the last few years now. Now everyone will play it at the same time. It's a small gesture, but it's nice. Thirdly, the game will launch on Steam on day one. Hallelujah! Absolutely no one has ever wanted to boot up the Ubisoft launcher for anything, and it's nice to know that from now on we won't have to. They also announced that plenty of improvements were on the way to Star Wars Outlaws, and that it too will launch on Steam on November 21st. I do expect some pretty steep Black Friday discounts for that one. So those are all good steps, but they don't change the fact that Ubisoft's current challenges are deep and cultural and systemic, and it's going to take a long time and a lot of work for us to start talking about Ubisoft in a different way. The stakes are very high. Since Ubisoft was founded 38 years ago, the company has grown to 20,000 employees compared to the 13,700 employees of EA, the 12,000 employees of Take-Two, or the 12,000 employees of PlayStation. Ubisoft is a big employer in the games industry, and if its leadership can't turn this company around, then many of those 20,000 jobs are at risk. It's a particularly pointed challenge given not only where Ubisoft currently is, but also where the industry is headed. The coming era is one that will likely be more disruptive than any we have ever seen in the history of video games, where development costs continue to balloon, where IP continues to be consolidated under a few banners, where the value of hardware and platform holders continues to diminish, and where new technologies open up new ways to play while closing the door on others. I, for one, am not optimistic that Yves Guillemot will find the necessary reserve of leadership and insight to right the course of a ship that has been listing for the better part of a decade. And as I've said before, I'd be much more optimistic about Ubisoft's fortunes if someone else were leading it. But regardless of who's in charge, it's time to turn the page on this current era of Ubisoft. There are too many great people and too many great franchises going to waste, and as for us as consumers, it's just kind of a bummer to have to keep assuming that future Ubisoft releases will meet our low expectations rather than exceeding them. Moving on to other news, Ubisoft may have let us down in the past, but very few game makers have bombed quite as hard or as spectacularly as Fntastic, makers of the day before. That game was hyped to high heaven thanks to a bunch of totally fake trailers, and of course when the game arrived, it was so far from what was promised that the publisher yanked it from sale and offered everyone who bought it a refund. Fntastic promptly announced that they were closing their doors, with one of their final sign-off tweets being, "Shit happens." Well, somehow, Fntastic has returned. They announced this week that they were back, hard at work on a new game, and they just need us to kick in a few bucks to help make it happen. It all started with a post on their official Twitter handle, quote, "Everyone deserves a second chance. We deeply apologize to everyone for the day before and take full responsibility for what happened. Check out our plan Fntastic 2.0, where we share how we'll fix our past mistakes and are preparing to return better," end quote. The tweet links to their website where you can download a PDF file that outlines their plans for a comeback, and I swear to God, I have not downloaded that file because PDF files can house some malicious shit and I do not trust these guys. I did manage to find a text version of it elsewhere though, and the plan essentially involves no longer utilizing volunteers, more honest and more transparent marketing, progress updates, beta tests, and a bunch of other stuff. The linchpin in all of this is a new game called Escape Factory. It's described as a physics-based multiplayer co-op escape game set in a dangerous factory. Fntastic claim they do not have the funds to make this themselves, so they've started a Kickstarter with a goal of around 22,000 Australian dollars. After about 5 days of being up, the project has a total of 45 backers, donating a collective 3,400 Australian dollars. Fntastic have said if they do not meet their funding target, they will not be able to go on making games. Now look, I actually agree with what they said about second chances. I don't think anyone owes them a second chance, and I certainly won't be giving them my money, but if they want to put their heads down and work towards rebuilding their lives and reputations, I honestly say Godspeed. I think it's an impossible task given how spectacular a disaster the day before was, but if that's what the studio's founders, Edward and Asen Gotovskev, want to do, then I say good luck to them. This is them, by the way. This is footage that they themselves provided to IGN back in 2021 as part of an exclusive gameplay reveal trailer. This video is still up on IGN's YouTube channel. So it was a little weird this week when someone, and I don't know who it was, issued a privacy strike against my video covering the day before, and the privacy complaint was timestamped at the exact moment when I was using this footage of the brothers Fntastic. I did not reveal any personal details about these brothers other than their names, and it wasn't even a revelation since their names and faces were already in the public domain because they put them there, freely viewable across numerous websites and videos well before I posted my own. Now again, I don't know who issued this privacy claim, and I don't want to allege that it was the brothers Fntastic because they're out there trying to turn over a new leaf, and I don't think this sort of spurious claim is congruent with that ambition. I'm hoping this is just some troll looking to make trouble. Regardless, a claim like this is highly unusual. YouTube is currently reviewing it, and if they deem that I have violated someone's privacy, the video will be deleted. I will let you know how things land. Turning to Tokyo Game Show now, that happened last week. I was there and it was a good time. I didn't get to see the Xbox showcase in person though, but apparently I didn't miss too much. The event was kind of hyped up by more than a few people prior to it airing, and I kind of think they should have pumped the brakes at least a little bit. We did get a new look at Metal Gear Solid Delta, which honestly continues to look great in that it's exactly the same game as before, only with nicer visuals. You can't improve on perfection, so it's nice to see that Konami aren't trying. StarCraft 1 and 2 are both coming to Game Pass, so that's nice. We've got a new trailer for Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, which was kind of similar to the other trailers we've seen to this point. Really hoping to see an extended gameplay trailer for this, and ideally some hands-on impressions from the press. We'll see if either of those things happen before launch. One of the few reveals we got during this showcase was Threads of Time, a retro-style RPG developed by Canadian studio Rio Games. Its developers have worked on Shovel Knight, Fortnite, Deltarune, and Tomb Raider games in the past. Apparently it also features the assistance of legendary developers and composers from the Xenoblade and Mana series. It's kind of meant to be a spiritual successor to Chrono Trigger, kind of like Sea of Stars was. No date for this one yet, but it does look promising. Speaking of the Mana series, Trials of Mana and Legend of Mana are now both available on Xbox Game Pass, which was a really nice surprise, and much to the delight of Final Fantasy fans, the Pixel Remaster compilation is finally available on Xbox. It's out right now, but sadly it's not on Game Pass, so you'll need to shell out for that one if you want it. Outside of that, the showcase was a lot of updates on games we already knew were coming, but with a distinct focus on the Japanese market. In that sense, the showcase was successful because it demonstrated Xbox's continued commitment to Japanese-made games, but on the other hand, there wasn't a lot to write home about. It was fine, but probably a bit of a missed opportunity after Sony's fairly middling state of play gave Xbox a wide opening for a bit of one-upsmanship. A quick lightning round to finish off. Jason Schreier says Guerrilla's next game is Horizon Online, a live service based on the Horizon universe. Speaking during the Spawnwave podcast, he said that they were working on a new single-player Horizon game, but that online was the next cab off the rank. He says a lot of people are working on it. I'm still hoping it's a Monster Hunter style game because I think that'd be sick. It's probably going to be an extraction shooter though, knowing my luck. Speaking of Horizon, did you guys see these cheeky Horizon Zero Dawn PS4 price hikes? Well, last week, Sony revealed the world's most unnecessary remaster, that being Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered. It's a $10 upgrade to get the remaster if you own the original, but you can score it really cheaply if you bought a PS4 copy, got a free upgrade to the PS5 version because Sony was shamed into offering that after trying to back out of that promise, and then you could pay your tenner to get the remaster. Well, Sony closed that loophole pretty quickly. They doubled the price of the PS4 version of the game, and that's of course after they removed it from the PS Plus catalog. A remaster that no one wanted, resulting in a more expensive product for everyone. Great job, keep it up, Sony. Circling back to Jason Schreier for just a second, he's also said that Blizzard are working on a StarCraft shooter. No, it's not Ghosts, and no, it's not that other StarCraft shooter that also got cancelled. It's a whole new thing that's being led by Dan Hay, who previously worked on Far Cry games. That scoop comes courtesy of Schreier's soon-to-be-released book titled Play Nice, The Rise, Fall, and Future of Blizzard Entertainment, which is out sometime next week. Schreier is actually joining the FPS podcast this week to chat about that, so be sure to tune in on your podcast platform of choice. That'll go up over the weekend. Devolver Digital is launching a new label dedicated to adapting entertainment IP into video games. The label is called Big Fan Games, and it's basically a play to get more indie developers working on projects leveraging big IPs. They have 6 active projects in development with the aim of getting around 4 to 5 games out a year. Sounds good to me, to be honest. If they can get some studio to make more of those PS2 style Lord of the Rings games, then I think this whole thing would have been worth it. And finally, did you all catch that Death Stranding 2 presentation at Tokyo Game Show? Kojima took to the stage along with members of the Japanese voice cast. He showed off a bit more of the game, but not too much. He did say the game is tracking for a 2025 release, but wouldn't commit to a specific date. The highlight of the show was this, which is what I secretly suspect was Kojima's passion project all along. This is Death Stranding 2's photo mode that lets you take pictures of the Hollywood starlets that Kojima-san has scanned into a digital existence. They will pose, they will dance, they will flirt with the camera, and even flirt with you if you have imagination enough. I wager Kojima certainly does. So what got announced or delayed this week? Well, first up, we got Zuck 2.0 back on stage to show off the latest phase of his makeover and his new fit. Not gonna lie, he's looking pretty good. That wasn't all though. He also announced the Meta Quest 3S. Now this isn't exactly a new Quest or even a slight upgrade. It's a less powerful but more affordable headset, which suggests that the pain points of VR aren't just the technical capabilities, but also actually getting people to cross that threshold to buy one and put it on. The 3S is bigger, it has no depth sensors, has a narrower field of view, a lower display resolution, worse sensors for worse clarity, but it's pretty aggressively priced at $300 for the 128GB model, and it comes packed with Batman Arkham Shadow, which I've played, and it's actually pretty damn good. The rest of the Quest models are being phased out completely in favor of this one, all except for the top-end Quest 3 model with 512GB of storage, which remains at $500 for anyone who wants to get really serious. My hot take? I just can't really see how this SKU makes sense. The Quest 3 wasn't cheap, but if you ask me, it's extraordinary value given how much it can do. This downgraded model makes some big trade-offs, and I think most people who are buying VR headsets are informed consumers who will look at these trade-offs and say, no thanks. I think the future of VR uptake lies in better tech that solves problems, rather than cheaper tech that makes those problems worse, but that's just me. Sticking with VR for just another second, one of the most notable game announcements from Meta was that Square Enix's Triangle strategy is coming to Meta Quest. This one was from the Bravely Default and Octopath Traveler team, and it was a really good turn-based tactics RPG that looks like it would translate well to VR. It was doing the whole 3D, 2D hybrid art style to begin with, and now that translates to a 3D battlefield you can loom over to command your 2D soldiers. No date for this one yet, but I'm going to guess it's sometime next year. A handful of announcements out of Tokyo Game Show last week, which are pretty niche, but Ed is making me talk about them anyway. Beloved RPG studio Level 5 held a mini showcase to show off a bunch of their upcoming games, but unfortunately many of them came with news of delays. The closest one to releasing is Professor Layton and the New World of Steam, which will come to Switch sometime in 2025, and given how many Nintendo DS consoles that series helped ship, you can probably bet good money that Nintendo are making sure this one hits at a good time to move the next Switch console. Similar thing with Fantasy Life: The Girl Who Steals Time, which is an RPG life simulation hybrid that moved its fair share of 3DS consoles back in the day. Level 5 also talked about Holly Horror Mansion, the spiritual successor to Yokai Watch. Yokai Watch was the company's Pokemon-like that involved capturing Japanese spirits, which was the biggest selling series on the 3DS not made by Nintendo themselves. This successor will be another big transmedia project involving anime as well as games, but we won't hear more about it for some time. Meanwhile, the company's biggest project, the previously announced open-world detective RPG Deca Police, was delayed out of 2024 and all the way into 2026. This one was planned for PlayStation and PC as well as Switch, and they either have very big plans for that one or realize they had to knuckle down and focus on shipping some games next year instead. Still with the TGS announcements, Koei Tecmo and Team Ninja announced Venus Vacation Prism Dead or Alive Extreme. So the company that made a fighting game full of sexy girls, Dead or Alive, then moved those characters to the beach to play volleyball for some reason, and they've now thrown all pretense out the window and they've just made a straight up dating sim. This one is coming to PC, PS5, and PS4, but as of right now, it'll only be available in Asian markets. Thank God for VPNs. Nine Souls is a brilliant 2D combat Metroidvania from Taiwanese horror developer Red Candle Games. This one came out earlier on PC this year and is overwhelmingly positive with over 11,000 reviews, and they've just announced it's coming to every console including Switch on November 26th. A bit of an update on Power World makers Pocket Pair, who right now are having to fight Nintendo in the courtroom over patent infringements relating to Power World, or patent, as the comment section corrected me last week. I don't know, man, they both are fine, okay? Patent, they're fine. Anyway, they announced the launch of Power World on PS5 at last week's PlayStation State of Play, but it seems like that launch won't be happening in their native Japan. The company put out a statement on their Japanese Twitter account, roughly translated as, quote, "The release date in Japan has not yet been decided. We apologize to everyone in Japan who is looking forward to it," end quote. No doubt this situation is at least somewhat related to the fact that the lawsuit is going to play out in Japanese courts, and that releasing the game in Japan on PS5 might make things even more expensive for Pocket Pair should they lose. Sure, this could just be a delay, or it could even be a cancellation. Chances are it'll be a while before Japan gets Power World on PS5, a fact that I'm sure is making Phil Spencer sleep a little better at night, especially after that TGS showcase. Speaking of going to sleep, it's time to say goodnight to The Simpsons Tapped Out, the city builder mobile game made by EA, which is shutting down after 12 long years. The game made EA over $130 million in its first 2 years, but now it's going to be permanently taken offline come 24th January 2025. The news comes as EA is downsizing many of its mobile studios across the world and streamlining that side of the business. There may have also been some licensing arrangements with Disney which have now expired, but either way, it's a sad day when a game that so many people played just gets closed forever. Obviously not a great way to respect the work of all those developers either. Let's hope a fan revival project helps it rise from the ashes at some point in the future. And finally, it looks like Pokemon Unite, the free-to-play Pokemon MOBA on Switch and mobile, is getting shut down in Belgium and the Netherlands. They're giving players plenty of notice. It's going away on November 30th in 2025, but in-game items and subscriptions will be canned at the end of October 2024. Now, they didn't give an actual reason for this shutdown, but we can make a pretty good guess that it's because Belgium's strict laws regarding loot boxes and gambling are very problematic for most mobile games. The Netherlands doesn't have a strict law yet, but they are currently pursuing one. Last year, Unite added a prize machine mechanic to the game, which was essentially a gacha loot box element, but with worse odds. So it's bye-bye Pokemon Unite. With Australia's recent changes to ratings relating to gambling and loot boxes, I wonder if we'll see the same thing down here at some point too. So what came out last week? Well, starting off with a few of the smaller Steam releases, Athena Crisis was that Advance Wars clone that expands the idea for a PC audience full of customizations. That's sitting at a 92% very positive user rating on Steam with a few dozen reviews which all say that yes, this is Advance Wars, but somehow better. Big call. Drive Rally was that throwback arcade racer and it's done pretty well for itself with 84% very positive on Steam. People seem to love the arcade style handling, especially on the Steam Deck, though there are a few bugs to be ironed out. Still more to come on that one as it's just launched into early access. Breachway is that Starship combat management game from Manor Lord's publisher Hooded Horse. They've had a good run with strategy picks lately, and this one has launched into early access with mostly positive reviews. Some rough edges, a steep learning curve, but the hardcore strategy folks seem to like it. Now to the big ones. We touched on The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom last week. Back then, I said I really liked it, and I'm certainly not alone in that take. With it sitting at a mighty 87 on OpenCritic, with plenty of glowing reviews praising its creative puzzling, and that's despite a fair few middle-of-the-road reviews with plenty of valid criticism. For example, VGC scored this one a 3 out of 5 and said, quote, "The potential for a special Zelda adventure is present in Echoes of Wisdom's ideas, but even the execution means it's neither as mechanically refreshing or satisfying as A Link Between Worlds, or memorable and well-crafted as Link's Awakening. There's plenty to like and not enough to love, which for a series like Zelda is less than we've come to expect," end quote. And honestly, even the glowing reviews hint at the fact that the game hasn't quite reached its full potential, like IGN's for example, who scored it 9 out of 10 and said, quote, "This experiment doesn't produce an entirely perfect result, with a little bit of clunky menu management and combat that simply isn't quite as compelling, but it's an impressively successful one all the same," end quote. Still a great effort for Zelda's first real outing as the true star of a game, and hopefully not the last time we see her in that leading role, since this style of game certainly looks like it could support 1 or 2 more sequels. Moving right along to Shadows of Doubt. This is the procedurally generated immersive sim detective game that launched into 1.0 for PC and it arrived on consoles for the first time. It's sitting at a fair 71 on OpenCritic with a handful of reviews, like this glowing one from PC Gamer, who gave it an 83 out of 100 and said, quote, "Despite a few technical and mechanical gripes, Shadows of Doubt is an impressive and unique addition to the immersive sim pantheon that manages to do a whole lot with relatively little. I can't think of any other game that's made me feel like the sleuth this one does, nor one that's made me feel as much of a glorious idiot when I leap out of an 8th-story window to escape an angry squad of cops," end quote. However, the few console reviews do point to some big issues with that version. For example, CGM reviewed the PS5 version of the game and gave it a 4 out of 10, saying that the technical issues like very long load times, sound dropouts made it, quote, "almost unplayable in its current state," end quote. Maybe stick with the PC port for this one. The classic Worms Armageddon came out on consoles last week in a slick little package put together by the preservation-focused Digital Eclipse, and like all their releases, it seems to be a good one. No aggregator score yet, but Nintendo Life gave it a 9 out of 10, saying, quote, "The team hasn't gone mad with new additions or tweaks to the core experience. When the original game remains such a bona fide classic more than 20 years after its release, it really doesn't need much tinkering with. The added bonus of the Game Boy Color version, alongside a wealth of interesting interviews and archive footage, makes this release a perfect entry point for newcomers, as well as a warm, nostalgic cuddle for veterans," end quote. And finally, EA's annual loot box simulator, EA Sports FC 25, also came out last week, and as you'd probably expect, is doing much the same thing as last year's edition, only with a few improvements, maybe. But that's not going to stop it from selling millions of copies, of course. It's got a fair OpenCritic score of 74, with IGN scoring it a 6 out of 10 and saying, quote, "For the leading football simulator, EA Sports FC 25 continues to lack the fluidity, polish, and excitement it should be expected to deliver. It introduces some interesting new features, particularly the fast-paced and compelling rush mode, but much of the package beyond that feels overly familiar," end quote. God, it feels like that same quote could be applied to like the past 20 years worth of FIFA releases, but it is a little late to complain about that at this point. So what's coming out this week? Well, it's starting to get a little quieter, but also a little more spooky with Halloween just around the corner. Kicking things off is Kill Night, which arrives tomorrow. It's a very promising looking gothic take on the isometric twin-stick shooter genre. The Steam demo for this one got a bit of buzz, and it's coming from one of the biggest studios based in Australia, Playside. This one comes out on all platforms, including Switch. Another great isometric action game, Wizard of Legend, has its sequel launching on PC in Steam Early Access on the same day. It's a co-op roguelike that involves using some aggressive magic, and Wizard of Legend 2 makes the jump to 3D visuals after being a sprite-based game. This is being published by Humble Games, which just went through some crazy shit this past few weeks, so if you're curious about this one, please do check it out and help give the devs some love. On Friday the 4th, Square Enix is turning Foam Stars into a free-to-play game, and this is after it was given away as a PS Plus freebie when it launched. Chances are the playbase isn't quite where Square Enix want this one to be, but given that it's still only on PS4 and PS5 exclusively, PC's right there, man. Just release it there and hopefully it does well. The remaster of Until Dawn comes out on Friday. This is the cinematic horror game that puts Supermassive on the map, and arguably is a high point for them that they haven't quite hit since, though the Corey does come pretty close. This remaster is being handled by Ballistic Moon, and chips away at the shrinking pile of remasters that Sony can feasibly distract themselves with before they eventually have to do something about Bloodborne, right? please, we can dream. Taking a quick detour, on Monday next week, something called Kind Words 2 Lo-Fi City Pop comes out on PC. We profiled this one in a Steam Next Fest roundup a little while ago. It's a nice little social game about being anonymously kind to people. You'll write letters and throw them into the ether and get responses from real people. The original version of this won a BAFTA award, and it's overwhelmingly positive on Steam with over 7,000 reviews, so there's definitely a lot of people out there wearing their hearts on their sleeve, which is lovely. The sequel adds a record to give and receive recommendations for things to watch and listen to, as well as other additions. If you need to feel warm and fuzzy, then do take a look at this one. But if you're in the mood for blood and pain and unsettlingly sexy demon mommies, well, you're in luck this week, because Diablo 4 Vessel of Hatred launches the very next day on October 8th for all platforms bar Switch. This is the first big expansion for Diablo 4, which adds a new class called the Spiritborn, who uses animal stuff to mess things up. A whole bunch of other changes are also coming to the game, like the ability to better tweak challenge and difficulty. And while we're on the subject, this week on the Patreon, we've got an interview with series overlord Rod Ferguson and Vessel of Hatred director Brett Gibson about the hard lessons they learned about actually developing Diablo as a live service following the rocky launch of the game. A really interesting conversation I had with those guys while I was over at Gamescom. I'll drop a link to that one below the like button. It's not behind a paywall, free for all to read. And finally, when we talk about doing what your fan base wants, there's no worse example than Konami and Silent Hill. This week we're going to see whether the big gamble to get Bloober Team to remake one of survival horror's all-time masterpieces, Silent Hill 2, is going to pay off. This release has had a lot of heated discussion ever since its existence was rumored, fueled by opinions on Bloober's past work and Konami's heavy exploitation of its legacy IP. This comes out on October 8th for PC and PS5, where it will be a console exclusive for exactly 1 year. Looking forward to catching up on the reviews for this one next week, that's for sure. Alright, time for a change of pace and a change of art style, so put this on your radar.
Here is what I learned during my years as a reporter. Not every door opens with a key.
This is Phoenix Springs. It's a neo-noir adventure game that tries to modernize a lot of the elements of the genre in a slick and stunning fashion, made by a 3-person art collective called Caligram Studio that explains the almost Andy Warhol-esque art design, which does look really, really nice. It follows a reporter who is looking for her lost brother after he goes missing in the enigmatic Phoenix Springs, which is of course steeped in mystery and eerie vibes. Instead of using a traditional item system for puzzles, you need to piece together your own words representing your thoughts and link them to form your own contextual clues, which sounds very clever for a mystery game. Early previews for the opening hours of this one were really glowing, and it's already won a bunch of awards on the festival circuit over the past few years. If you're a fan of mysteries, eerie vibes, or just want to see more of this thing in motion, then do be sure to give this one a wish list. You can find a link to it over on our Steam Curator page, which also has links to all of the other Put This On Your Radar stuff I've recently covered. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Sort of free stuff time now, and right now Epic are giving away The Spirit and the Mouse, which is a heartfelt narrative adventure game featuring a mouse with electrical powers that is definitely not Pikachu, just in case Nintendo's lawyers were listening. That one's available until October 4th. After that, you'll be able to grab Bear and Breakfast, which is a charming game where you literally play a giant bear, building and managing a forest bed and breakfast for humans to enjoy. This one has a nice little gameplay loop, which has been consistently updated by its small 3-person team ever since it came out in 2022. It launched with a strong open critic rating. It has very positive reviews on Steam. My friend Lucy James really loved it, and it'll cost you literally nothing to pick up this game, which should hopefully result in Epic giving the developers a nice little kickback for their hard work. Outside of that, the PS Plus lineup for the month should be available by the time this video is live. Highlight for the month is Dead Space Remake, love that, and we're still waiting to hear from both Xbox Game Pass and Prime Gaming on what they have to offer this month, so we'll be sure to check in on that next week. This week's feel-good story for the week is one we've known about for a little while now, but given Diablo 4's expansion is launching this week, it feels like a good time to share it. So I'm a big fan of Diablo, and I have been ever since the original release approximately 3,000 years ago, but you know who's an even bigger Diablo fan? Whoopi Goldberg. For real, the actual Whoopi Goldberg of Sister Act, Ghost, and The View has spoken many times about how much she loves playing Diablo, or at least she did until Microsoft bought Activision Blizzard and stopped releasing games on Mac. So when Diablo 4 launched last year, Whoopi bought it thinking that she could run it on her Mac, but when she discovered it was PC only, she went on this big public pissed off tirade on social media and her daytime TV show like a true gamer.
This is what I'm asking you, Blizzard. Blizzard Entertainment, this is Whoopi. You know how much I love Diablo. I would like y'all to let those of us who use our apples to play, allow us to play on the Apple. Take Diablo 4 and let us do it and have a great time.
At the time, the series director Rod Ferguson was posting through it saying, quote, "I did not have Whoopi Goldberg yelling at me on Instagram on my Diablo 4 launch bingo card," end quote. Okay, so that was really weird, but here's where the story gets even weirder. Whoopi has her own cannabis company. Yes, Whoopi's Weed, though sadly it's not called that. She hosted a PR event for that company, and for whatever reason, the Diablo franchise director Rod Ferguson showed up to that event to give Whoopi a PC that she could play Diablo on. What's more, he was joined by 2 cosplayers who were dressed as Lilith and Inaris. Can you imagine being at a weed event when all of a sudden you see 2 literal demons walk in the door? You are either going to completely lose your shit or be like, "I'd like to double my order, thank you very much." All right, ladies and gents, it's time to come clean. Yes, I'm very sick right now. I'm sure you could have guessed it by just listening to my voice, but just in case you were listening to this episode through a walkie-talkie or something, that's not static you're hearing, it's just my croaky-ass voice. If you want to help speed me towards a recovery, nothing heals a YouTuber like big numbers on the like ratio. Likes are to YouTubers as sun is to Superman. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and ding that notification bell so you'll know the next time we upload. Huge amounts of content dropping this week. My Zelda review will go up, Austin's World of Warcraft War Within review goes up, and the FPS podcast featuring Jason Schreier. Big week, so I hope you'll join us. Thanks for watching, and a big thanks to this video sponsor, Squarespace. For years now, Squarespace has been the very best in the website creation business. Their tools were second to none, making it super easy to create a website no matter your experience with building websites. You could be a total beginner and Squarespace's tools would let you create a professional looking website in mere minutes. Well, Squarespace just took things to a whole new level. Their all new design intelligence framework leverages their 2 decades of experience in website creation to give even more tools to shape the website of your dreams. Not only can you select from and customize their super flexible design templates, you can also now provide prompts that allow you to refine the tone of what is written on your website. Just type in what you'd like to communicate and then select what sort of tone you'd like it to have, like playful, funny, professional, etc. Squarespace will then refine your words so it sounds and reads just right. This same technology can assist in writing product descriptions, blog posts, or mailouts. It's super helpful if you're not a native English speaker or you're just looking for some inspiration for how to word things better. That's not all though. Squarespace Payments takes all the work and hassle out of managing payments on your website. It's really quick and easy to get set up with, and it gives your customers tons of ways to pay, knocking down one of the barriers that might stop you from getting a sale or a booking. Squarespace isn't just about the front-end experience though. It's also got all the back-end stuff you need to make sure your website is surfaced in search. Every Squarespace website supports sophisticated SEO tools that are just as easy to use as everything else Squarespace offers, meaning you can be sure that the customers who are looking for you can find you. There's so much more that Squarespace offers, so if you'd like to check it out for yourself, you can visit squarespace.com to try it for free. And if you want to get serious, visit squarespace.com/skillup to get 10% off your purchase of a website or a domain name. A big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.